This completely floored me when a neuroscientist friend explained the data behind it. 82% of women over 40 reported feeling physically repelled when a man touches them in the conventional zones first. You assume you know exactly where to put your hands, but the science says you are activating the wrong neural pathways entirely. There is one specific, neurologically wired spot that every woman over 40 is biologically programmed to respond to, and when you miss it, you are essentially locking the door to intimacy and throwing away the key. What makes this particularly dangerous is that most men have been conditioned by outdated advice to do the exact opposite of what actually works. You reach for her waist, you lean in for an aggressive kiss, you grab her hips, and you wonder why she suddenly has a headache or needs to check her phone. The truth is brutal. When you touch a mature woman incorrectly, you trigger a stress response so powerful that her body physically shuts down arousal. Her nervous system interprets your touch as a threat, not an invitation. By the end of this video, I will reveal the exact location of this spot, the precise neurological reason it works, the step-by-step technique to stimulate it without looking desperate, and the critical timing that separates men who create magnetic attraction from men who get politely rejected. But I have to warn you, once you understand this method, you cannot pretend you do not know. The way she responds to you will shift immediately, and you will finally understand why every previous approach failed so spectacularly. Before I show you where this spot is, you need to understand the seismic shift that happens inside a woman's brain and body after she hits 40. This is not pop psychology. This is measurable, observable neuroscience. When a woman enters her 40s, her entire hormonal architecture undergoes a radical reconfiguration. Estrogen fluctuates unpredictably. Progesterone levels shift. Cortisol, the stress hormone, remains chronically elevated because she is juggling career demands, family obligations, aging parents, financial pressures, and a mountain of invisible labor that nobody acknowledges. Her tolerance for superficial interaction drops to absolute zero. She has survived terrible relationships, economic uncertainty, social betrayals, and countless disappointments. Her internal filter for manipulation and insincerity is ruthlessly calibrated. She can smell desperation from across a crowded room. She can detect neediness in the way you shift your weight. And when you touch her incorrectly, she does not just feel uncomfortable. She feels fundamentally disrespected. Think about what her typical day actually looks like. She wakes up already carrying a mental load that would crush most people. She is managing work deadlines, coordinating household logistics, possibly raising teenagers or caring for elderly relatives, monitoring her own health issues, and dealing with 1,000 tiny decisions that nobody else even notices. By the time evening arrives, her nervous system is operating in survival mode. Her cortisol is spiking, her body is tense, her brain is still problem-solving. Now, here is where most men commit relationship suicide without even realizing it. You walk into the kitchen where she is scrolling through her phone trying to decompress after a brutal day, and you immediately invade her space. Maybe you wrap your arms around her waist from behind. Maybe you go straight for a heavy, demanding kiss. Maybe you start kneading her shoulders with all the subtlety of a massage therapist working on a side of beef. And then you stand there looking wounded when she stiffens, pulls away, or gives you a patronizing pat on the arm. Let me explain what is happening inside her body in that exact moment. Her brain is still in high alert mode. Her cortisol levels are elevated. When you suddenly grab her with an overtly sexual or demanding touch, her nervous system does not register it as romance. It registers it as another obligation, another expectation, another item on her already overflowing to-do list. You have just transformed yourself from a potential source of pleasure into another source of stress. Congratulations, you played yourself. This is the biological reality you are fighting against. High cortisol chemically blocks oxytocin, which is the bonding and arousal hormone. When her cortisol is elevated, the gates to intimacy are welded shut. No amount of passionate kissing, aggressive grabbing, or romantic gestures will open those gates. In fact, the harder you push, the more firmly they close. You might interpret this as rejection. You might think she does not want you anymore. But the actual truth is simpler and more fixable. You are using a sledgehammer when you need a scalpel. So what is the exact spot? The answer lies in the intersection of vulnerability, neuroscience, and strategic restraint. Every woman over 40 wants to be touched first on the nape of her neck, right where the hairline meets the upper spine, paired simultaneously with a grounding hand on the small of her lower back. This is not guesswork. This is strategic activation of her parasympathetic nervous system. The nape of the neck is one of the most densely nerve-packed and vulnerable areas on the human body. It contains thousands of sensory receptors that connect directly to the vagus nerve, which controls the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic system governs relaxation, bonding, and arousal. It is the biological opposite of the fight-or-flight response. When you stimulate the nape of her neck correctly, you are sending a direct neurological signal to her brain that she is safe, protected, and valued. You are manually switching her nervous system from threat mode to connection mode. But here is the part that separates complete amateurs from absolute masters. Execution is everything. Most men, after learning this information, will immediately stomp over to their partner and grab the back of her neck as if they are disciplining a misbehaving dog. That is the fastest possible way to ruin everything. The nape of the neck is a vulnerability zone. Grabbing it aggressively triggers a defensive threat response. You need to use what I call the ghost touch method. The ghost touch is feather-light, warm, and almost accidental. It hovers at the edge of her awareness just long enough to make her hyper-conscious of your presence, but not so long that it feels demanding or invasive. Here is a practical scenario. You are walking through a restaurant to your table. The space is crowded. Someone needs to get past you. You step slightly behind her, place your palm warm and flat against the small of her lower back to guide her gently forward, and as you lean in to whisper something casual, you lightly brush the nape of her neck with your fingertips while moving a strand of hair out of the way. That combination is neurologically devastating. The warmth of your palm on her lower back grounds her. It communicates stability and protection. The whisper-light touch on the nape of her neck sends an electric current straight down her spine and directly into her brain's reward centers. You have just bypassed her conscious mind and spoken directly to her nervous system. Her brain immediately stops running through her mental to-do list and starts wondering, did he do that on purpose? Is he going to do it again? This is how you create a psychological open loop. An open loop is an unanswered question that the brain becomes obsessed with solving. When you touch her in this precise way and then smoothly continue your conversation as if nothing happened, you create a vacuum of anticipation. Human beings are biologically wired to chase warmth and connection. When you offer high-quality, deeply stimulating touch and then confidently withdraw it without asking for anything in return, she will subconsciously lean toward you. She will crave that touch again. You have planted a seed of desire that will compound exponentially over the next several hours. However, timing is absolutely non-negotiable. If you linger too long, the entire effect collapses. The real magic is in the pull-away. After you brush the nape of her neck and guide her with your hand on her lower back, you must immediately remove your hands and step back into your own space. Act completely normal. Continue your conversation. Do not hover. Do not stare at her expectantly, waiting for validation. This sudden removal of warmth creates a powerful vacuum effect. She will notice the absence of your touch far more intensely than she noticed the presence of it. There is a second critical layer that most men completely ignore. You cannot only touch her body. You must simultaneously touch her mind. For a woman over 40, her mind is her primary gateway to arousal. If you fail to engage her mind first, you will never gain sustained access to her body. This might sound abstract, but it is shockingly simple in execution. Touching her mind means proactively removing her stressors without being asked. Research from the Gottman Institute found that women reported a 73% increase in desire when their partner independently handled a burdensome task. Let me tell you a story that perfectly demonstrates this principle. A friend of mine named Rachel was dating a guy named Marcus. Marcus was objectively attractive, financially successful, and socially charming. But Rachel told me she felt absolutely nothing when he touched her. She described it as mechanical and transactional. Then she started seeing a man named Jordan. Jordan was not as conventionally handsome as Marcus, but he operated on an entirely different level. On their fifth date, Rachel was visibly stressed because her car had been towed earlier that day and she was dealing with a work crisis. When Jordan arrived to pick her up, he did not immediately try to kiss her or initiate physical contact. He walked in, saw her hunched over her laptop with her shoulders practically touching her ears, and calmly closed the screen. He said, "I already handled the restaurant reservation, called an Uber, and you have absolutely zero responsibilities for the next 6 hours." As he said this, he stepped behind her chair, placed both hands lightly on her shoulders, and used his thumbs to trace slow, intentional circles at the base of her neck. Rachel told me she felt her entire body exhale for the first time in days. Jordan had touched her mind by removing her logistical stress, and he anchored that psychological relief with the exact physical touch her nervous system was desperately craving. He did not ask for credit. He did not hover waiting for praise. He simply handled the situation, delivered the grounding touch, and walked calmly to the door to wait for her. By the time they reached the restaurant, Rachel was completely mesmerized. This is the difference between a man who understands mature female psychology and a man who is still operating on high school instincts. High school instinct says, grab her body and she will want you. Mature masculine strategy says, create an environment where her nervous system can relax and her body will naturally open to you. Another devastatingly effective application of this technique happens during completely mundane, everyday moments. The kitchen, believe it or not, is one of the most potent locations to build romantic tension, assuming you execute it correctly. If she is standing at the counter making coffee or meal prepping, do not walk up and grope her. That is annoying and counterproductive. Instead, walk up close behind her so she can feel the warmth radiating from your chest, but do not press your full body weight against hers. Reach past her to grab a mug or utensil, and as you do, let the inside of your forearm lightly brush against the back of her neck. Whisper something completely ordinary in her ear, such as, "Do we need more milk?" Then take your mug and walk out of the room. This blew my mind when I first read the research, but women consistently ranked these fleeting, non-demanding touches as the most arousing moments in their relationships. The reason is straightforward. It demonstrates supreme self-control. A man who lacks self-control will grab, grope, and demand instant gratification. A man with ironclad self-control can create a massive spike in her arousal and then confidently walk away. Women over 40 are magnetically drawn to men who exhibit self-control because it signals emotional maturity, reliability, and the promise of delayed gratification, which is infinitely more satisfying than rushed release. Let me explain how this connects to the concept of safe danger. Women want to feel completely safe with their partner, but they also crave a hint of unpredictability. They want to know you are a stable, dependable man, but they also want to feel that underlying hum of raw masculine presence. The nape of the neck is the perfect intersection of these two desires. It is a protective, nurturing gesture that simultaneously carries an electric charge, reminding her you are fully capable of taking control when the situation calls for it. Now consider the opposite approach. Think about the man who constantly pokes his partner for attention, taps her shoulder repeatedly, or gives uninvited, aggressive massages that feel more punishing than pleasurable. These actions are profoundly irritating to the female nervous system. An uninvited shoulder massage forces her to focus on her tension and discomfort, which is the polar opposite of arousal. You want your touch to be a distraction from her stress, not a painful reminder of it. To truly master this, you must become forensically observant. Watch her body language with obsessive attention. Does she lean into your hand when you place it on her lower back? If she leans in, you have successfully bypassed her defenses. Does she stiffen or pull her shoulders up toward her ears? If she stiffens, her cortisol is still dangerously elevated. You need to back off, give her physical space, and focus on removing whatever mental burden is currently occupying her brain. Ask her an open-ended question that allows her to vent. Listen without trying to immediately solve the problem. Validate her feelings. Once she sighs and her shoulders visibly drop, that is your precise window to step in and offer that grounding, electrifying touch. This level of attentiveness separates the top 1% of men from the rest of the population. Women over 40 have spent decades compromising, accommodating, and putting their own needs last. When a man enters her life who demonstrably knows how to read her body, ease her mind, and touch her in ways that make her feel genuinely seen and cherished, he becomes absolutely irreplaceable. She will start initiating contact. She will seek you out. She will become the pursuer simply because being in your presence feels incredibly good to her entire nervous system. There is one more critical element that amplifies the effectiveness of this technique exponentially: scent and breath. When you lean in to brush the nape of her neck, she will instinctively become aware of your natural scent and the warmth of your breath. These are primal subconscious triggers that bypass rational thought entirely. Make sure you smell clean and subtly appealing. Avoid overpowering cologne that smells like you bathed in a department store sample counter. Natural, clean skin with a hint of quality fragrance is far more effective. When you whisper near her neck, let your breath gently warm her skin. This creates a multi-sensory experience that her brain will replay obsessively throughout the rest of the day. You also need to understand the power of repetition and conditioning. The first time you use the ghost touch technique, she might be mildly intrigued. The second time, she will start to anticipate it. By the third and fourth time, her body will begin to associate your presence with that specific feeling of safety and arousal. You are literally training her nervous system to crave your touch. This is classical conditioning in action. Pavlov rang a bell before feeding his dogs, and eventually, the bell alone triggered salivation. You are the bell. Her arousal is the salivation. But here is a critical warning you cannot ignore. Do not overuse this technique. Scarcity creates value. If you touch the nape of her neck every single time you interact, it becomes predictable and loses all its power. Use it strategically. Use it when she is stressed. Use it when you want to shift the emotional energy between you. Use it when you want to plant a seed that will blossom throughout the evening. But do not make it a robotic habit. The power lies entirely in its unpredictability. Let me share one final story that ties all of these principles together. A woman I know named Elena had been married for 19 years. Her husband, David, was a decent man, but their physical relationship had completely flatlined. David would occasionally try to initiate intimacy by grabbing her waist or going straight for a kiss, and Elena would politely deflect. She told me she felt absolutely nothing. She genuinely believed the spark was permanently extinguished. Then, David attended a relationship workshop where he learned about nervous system regulation and non-demanding touch. The following week, Elena was standing in the kitchen feeling completely overwhelmed by a stack of unpaid bills and ongoing family drama. David walked up behind her, gently placed his hand on the small of her back, and used his other hand to lightly trace the nape of her neck while whispering, "I already paid the electric bill and scheduled the plumber for tomorrow morning. You have nothing to worry about tonight." Then he walked away without waiting for a response. Elena told me she stood there in complete shock. For the first time in literal years, she felt genuinely seen, protected, and desired in a way that did not feel demanding or transactional. That evening, she initiated intimacy for the first time in over 18 months. David had not begged. He had not complained. He had simply learned to speak the language her nervous system understood. You now hold the complete blueprint for transforming how you connect with a woman over 40. You understand the neurological mechanisms behind her stress and arousal. You know the exact location to touch, the precise technique to use, and the critical importance of touching her mind before you ever touch her body. You know that high-value touch is light, warm, strategic, and always paired with the confident pull away. However, you must stay ruthlessly vigilant. Even with flawless technique, there are times when a woman's behavior signals a point of absolute no return. You might be applying everything correctly, but if she is consistently pulling away, creating deliberate physical distance, or showing complete emotional indifference, you could be standing on the edge of a cliff. You need to recognize the brutal reality before it destroys you. You must immediately watch the video titled 3 Signs She No Longer Wants You in Her Life, Female Psychology. If those red flags are present, no amount of perfect touch will save the connection, and you need to know exactly what to watch for before it is too late. Click that video on your screen right now, and I will show you the 3 unmistakable signals that she has mentally and emotionally checked out. Do not wait. Click it now.